Welcome to Rules of Villainy, where three new trading card game players quest and challenge their way to the competitive top tables and discuss their opinions on Disney's Lorcana. This is episode 16. This week we'll be discussing the news of Lorcana, Constituents Corner, where we answer your questions, discussing Shimmering Sky Set Championships, and the upcoming Disney Lorcana Challenge in Seattle, and as always, our villain of the week. I'm Villain Vince, joined by my two co-hosts, Villain Andy and the mayor of Lorcana, Brad. How's it going tonight, gentlemen?
Good. How about you, Andy? How you feeling?
Nah, not bad. Not bad.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Not
a little
bad.
nervous about Seattle, but
Dude, look, we got our jerseys, man, and we got stickers.
Sticker? You got your stickers to hold up? Oh, it's already on Andy's mic. Yeah,
we got my sticker on here. It's
Yeah.
temporary edition.
The mayor, number 2.
Ruby. Show the front of that to folks so they can get.
Oh,
have
this is the
nightmares.
bad one, though. This is the bad one. I'm wearing the good one.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. You should show the front of it to give folks a little bit of nightmares. It doesn't
Scary,
even have a
Ruby.
mouth.
Ruby was not happy to have her picture taken.
I will just say that I think we're gonna have to create an arch nemesis, like Emerald, the Steel Dragon, to Ruby. That'll be our
That's
arch
good.
nemesis.
That's good. I'm certainly on board with that.
I bet so. But let's get into Underworld news. We have, what is this, week 2 of set championships happen this weekend? Feels like we're in week 4. I don't know why, but
Been a
lots
lot.
happened. How'd it go for everyone?
I think we had a good Saturday, Andy, over at our home store, Bodex. Fired off with he's holding up the card. We only fired off with 11, but we both managed. Andy top cut. Him and Kirsten actually both got top 2, which was fantastic. The better player got first place there. I will be taking no questions. But I bubble again, just like at Grapes. I bubbled from the top cut, so I was 5th place. Me and Andy, we intentionally drew just to guarantee me the points, and then we played anyway. And of course, his Emerald Steel just mollywopped me. Kind of gave him a little run for his money.
For record scratch.
What?
You're playing Emerald Steel,
Of course.
Andy?
Of course.
What? You're a Ruby Amethyst player. What happened?
Can't beat him, join him, right?
Can't beat him, join him. Wow.
We spent a week trying to figure out how to beat him, and then Andy's like, "Nah, that's too much work." Zan already did it. Zan already figured out how to beat him. We're gonna play this deck.
Yeah, it was really kind of alarming to hear Zan himself in an interview say that he doesn't believe the deck has any weaknesses. Like it can't really be beaten. There isn't a deck out there that is, really favored in the matchups, and so I just kind of skipped it and went to, if he already figured this out, that's kind of where I'm headed as well. Let's just cut to the front of the line.
I'll just say it is alarming, but it's not charming. And for those who get the reference, congratulations. For those that don't,
like I do. Or at least I've heard it before.
Better at musical theater. That's all I can say.
I don't know it. One thing I want to bring up that regarding that, though, is that you and Kirsten both played the exact same deck on Sunday at game night, which had a great turnout. I'm grateful for anybody who's listening that was there. We picked up even a couple new listeners, so thank you for subscribing.
31 people.
31 people. Second highest in St. Louis next to Grapes, which we were also affiliated with, right? Maybe it's a Rules of Villainy blessing, but joking. But what I wanted to ask about that was...
I'm not.
No, they're both great stores. It's all them. That you and Kirsten played the exact same deck on Sunday at game night. You top cut, and she ended up in 25th place with it. So what's the, what makes that? Because she's arguably just as good, if not better, than you at that game. And I'm on the camp that she's better than you, and we'll die on that hill. But joking aside, what makes that, being the exact same deck? How did that happen in that regard? If it's such a strong deck.
I mean, variance definitely exists. I ended up playing 2 different aggro matchups, I believe, or more relatively aggro matchups that I was a bit favored into. And I know that she played into some really rough matchups. She played into blue steel, which is a very underrepresented deck, but also very strong against green steel, especially if it gets what it needs to. And, sometimes you just see the cards, sometimes you don't. I hope she doesn't hear this before the next set championships, but I also have the completely foiled out version of our set of cards because a lot of the cards in this deck are very expensive, so we barely have 2 playsets enough for each of us. I actually was borrowing cards from teammates, specifically who has now requested them back because he plans on playing green steel after all this crap he literally just gave me. But I've got at least 2 enchanteds in my deck, so I think I think that I think that may have been what did it.
What was that? Vince is playing Emerald Steel now, huh?
Yeah, Vince is
thinking
about
it.
Maybe.
Brad,
I'm thinking about
I'm the only one uncorruptible in this group. It's
Brad says he's going to Ruby Amethyst now.
If we were Batman characters, Andy'd be the Joker, you'd be Harvey Dent, and I'm just the one. I'm Batman. I'm the one who doesn't get corrupted by this evil that is plaguing our game.
Listen, Brad, you either die on Blurple or you live long enough to play
Emerald Steel.
Exactly.
Oh man.
But I'm just gonna say George Clooney, best Batman.
We're not. That is going to take a whole podcast of. No, we're going to let that one go.
Batman is not a sanctioned Disney character. I'm going to edit all of this out of the podcast. So anyway,
good luck trying to edit that all out. It'll just be like a weird clip of the show. But anyway, we've got. I will move us along here. We do have Azurite Seas coming out here in the next few weeks. What?
Just one C.
Azurite. You know what?
Every time.
I was so close, and you just had to. Brad.
Next one, you'll get it.
Blue
Azurite
Ocean is coming out next month.
It's coming out in the next few weeks. I was able to finally pre-order it, so a lot of stores are doing pre-orders. I pre-ordered today.
Great.
So got a case set aside and a trove.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I'm excited.
I will say, in case you're getting into the game now and you haven't done the pre-orders and stuff before, if you pre-order online, that's gonna ship after the LGSs get the store. So you might see the ads in your Facebook reel and stuff to buy online from us, get these pre-order deals. I at least personally strongly encourage you to talk with your local game stores and see what their pricing is and pre-order with them so that you can pick it up in person. You can get it on that LGS launch day and not have to wait the 2 weeks, is it? Right? Before it goes out.
It's a little shorter this time. I think that has to do with Thanksgiving and Black Friday.
Okay.
Store releases, I think, on Wednesday and not on that
Friday. On the Friday.
So
it's only 2 days early, though, still.
Yeah.
And the plus side...
Which actually, leads me to a question. Ravensburger did say they were going to stick to this release. And I think Azurite Sea is the last one where they said they were committed to a 2-week release before LGS. Do you think that's something they will continue in the foreseeable future?
I hope they do. I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I do too. I agree.
I'd be curious to see the sales numbers between LGS and big box stores. I honestly think that LGS stores, sell through a lot more than the big box. I know I buy more from my local game store, and I buy a lot from Target and places like that. But I see cases and cases at a local game store, and then they sell out of them. I know a couple stores that are sold out of the current set. Whereas the 4 rows of blisters they had at my Target are still there. I still buy a couple every time I go.
I was at the my closest Target just recently and was shocked at how many troves are on. I've never seen so many troves on a shelf before. It had to be at least 20. And it's one of those things where I was going to say the plus side of ordering from your local game stores is, one, you're supporting local business, and two, you're in the store already where you can just sit down and play with somebody, and they host weekly, sometimes daily tournaments. There's stores here that have tournaments or just local play like 3 times a week, and it just helps continue running their business, and that's why we'll always promote going there first.
Well, to be fair, that's the same Target as my local Target.
Yeah.
And they've restocked a few times. So it's not like it's been just sitting on I don't want to give the impression like it hasn't sold. It's
yeah.
They're like on their 3rd or 4th restock. But I think case in point, at game night, we had to go back in sets for pricing because we didn't have enough Shimmering Skies because they had sold out of all of their Shimmering Skies product, which I was like kind of a little astonished about. I was like, wow. No kidding, huh?
I was doing well.
But we do have some new reveals. So Brad, tell us about these.
Yeah, the most recent one that brought a lot of confusion, I guess is what I would say, and a lot of people putting on their thinking caps this week was a location called the Mystical Tree. It's a 2-cost inkable location with a 7-body, 1 to move. It's an okay card. The abilities are not bad at the start. It's called not bad. It's not me judging it. At the start of your turn, you may move 1 damage counter from chosen character here to chosen opposing character, and hard-earned wisdom is at the start of your turn. If you have a character named Mama Odie here, you gain 1 lore, so it's encouraging more Mama Odie play. What is most interesting about it to me, and a lot of people right now trying to figure it out, is though it's number 69 out of 204.
Nice.
Yes, but also as in contrast to the last 5 sets, all the amethyst cards, which I don't know if I mentioned or not, this is an amethyst card, would have ended at 68. So we would have 34 cards in amber, 34 cards in amethyst, and then move on to emerald and so on and so forth. This is a 69 numbered card for amethyst, and it's not misnumbered. We've got confirmation from Rochelle on the community Discord that there's a reason why it's number 69. So it's caused a lot of speculation whether or not we were going to have maybe dual color cards, which is maybe teased in the last set with the Steel Stitch, which was a steel card but had the amethyst logo on it when he was holding a flag or a rope with the flag on it. Or other people were speculating that we would have colorless cards that I guess could maybe fit in every color. I've never dealt with this is my first TCG, so I don't know exactly what the mechanics are, but found it interesting that for the entire day, Monday or Tuesday of this week, everybody online was speculating, what could this mean? What's going on? And I want to know what your guys' thoughts are.
You know what? Not only have they decided no longer to sort cards by alphabetically, but they're just random. Colors are everywhere.
I had that idea that the Azurite Sea maybe flooded everything, and I was like, I would hate. As soon as I said that, I'm like, I would instantly hate it because my binders have to be numerical, and because of the first 5 sets, it's going to be all 1 color the whole way through. I would hate that so much if I had to do it numerically and every single color all over the place.
We have seen groupings of colors already, though, right? So we already know that like 3, 4, and 5 are all amber cards or something like that. Have they revealed card number 1 yet?
No.
Okay, so number 1 is Bucky. It's the errata bucket. Number 2 starts amber. That knocks it all back 1. That makes sense. That Mystical Tree is number 69. Nice. And then we just continue on, and there's 205 cards. Is the problem. But these all say out of 204, right?
Yeah.
So that's the only part of my theory that is not, is debunked.
I wasn't sure if you were serious or not. Do you actually think it's Bucky?
I mean, we have to get we have to get another Bucky, right? Like, it's been, they've had enough time, right? I feel like they've had enough time.
Maybe. I don't know what the printing patterns are, but
I still think we're gonna get that, in a store
shipped in like an OP kit,
P kit, versus
makes
sense in a reprint in a set. Although not impossible, but I'm not sure. I think that's legit here. I don't know. It's an interesting.
Is it
question.
possible? Is it possible we have like another maybe sort of puppy situation? I know the puppies were 1A, 2A, 2B.
but
is it possible that like there are 34 amber cards, but they go to 35?
No, because Rochelle also confirmed that every ink is getting the exact same amount of cards. So that's what also put a wrench in everything. Was all the inks are going to be equal. So I feel like I don't know, maybe there's colorless cards and dual color cards where number one is a colorless, but then somewhere in amber is a card that counts as amber and amethyst. So it counts as both, right?
I just feel like that would raise a lot of questions as far as, okay, well, do you have to be playing both amber and amethyst in order to play this card? Can you is it only for and the biggest thing in my opinion is all of this is going to be, we presume, legal for Continentals. So it seems a bit wild to introduce a huge new concept before Continentals.
That's a good point.
Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe they're like, let's, stir the pot a little, but
I didn't think about that point. That's actually really good. I don't think before the first Continentals and Worlds that they're going to change the game that drastically. So that kind of makes me just find out in a couple weeks probably, because we're getting closer. We're less than a month away now to the next set.
So I, in some ways, would agree with that premise if I thought that Ravensburger had planned quite as long for when like Continentals and Worlds and all of these DLCs were going to occur, because like they designed these sets well before even the first DLC even took place. I mean, we're talking so it's like, because I remember I was talking to one of the creators who's like one of the game developers in Chicago and stuff, and it's like they were working on like set 9 or 10 or something. They weren't like super responsive to exactly what set they were on, but like you could kind of tell when like you would ask a question and be like, okay, so what was the first set like you worked on? And they'd be like, oh, it's this set, Ursula's Return, which like had just come out and stuff. And they got hired like a year ago. So like you could kind of do the back of the envelope math to figure out exactly when they were, what set they should be working on now and where they're at. And so I'm that'd be some really advanced thinking to be like, and just given everything we know, I think about how that everything's happened so far. Don't get me wrong. I think Ravensburger's done an awesome job with their first TCG, and I really love the DLC. I'm really excited about the Continentals, and especially the World Championship, which I hope to go to. I'm planning on going to, no matter what. But I just think it's unlikely that the sets were designed in relation to those events.
Right.
So, and we haven't had a new mechanic in Lorcana for a while. So, honestly, like if I were to guess, my guess is probably some sort of new mechanic is being added to the game, whether it's a colorless card or something. I don't know. Something that's throwing the numbers off that will ultimately balance out at the end, and we'll find out in a few short weeks. But if I had to guess, that's what I would guess.
Yeah. One quick anecdote regarding those developers that we did play in Chicago. It was kind of wild to have him read my card because it's been so long since he's seen it. He forgot what it did. And I was like, that's wild, because you have to be so far in advance to forget whatever it was. I don't know. But yeah, just to add to your point.
They might just be working on their own cards, right? And I think there may be some like I guess I don't ultimately know, but I feel like they're working on these many, many years in advance, but they also have talked about how like the cards have changed over time. The pirates and the cards that Ryan Miller was playtesting 2 sets ago have changed into what was actually being produced. There is definitely some lead time where they have to sort of set this stuff in motion. But given their sort of 10-year plan, this big plan that they've had, I don't see any reason why they couldn't have also said, look, this is the start date of, set 1. This is our plan for releases. These are the mechanics we release in these sets. And this is when we start OP kits. This is when we start set championships. This is when we start DLCs, which could also explain potentially why some of the early DLCs were a little rougher, because Ravensburger said, look, they start now. We have to do them now in order to be on our timeline to make sure that everything sort of lines up. And I could see a new mechanic coming. It depends on what your definition of mechanic is. Also, like, locations really are the only sort of new large mechanic I think we've seen since before that was shift.
Was damage moving, I think, was another one.
I mean,
resist before moving. That. Yeah.
Do we talk about kicker? Right? Is the kicker cost? We lost Vince here.
Vince, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I would say that I think Singer Together.
Oh yeah,
Sing Together is a
and
big
the shift discard mechanic. Or the shift alternate cost mechanic.
That gets into the line of like kicker though, right? Is kicker the where you pay 2 extra to do an action on something? Is that considered a new mechanic? The first time we've seen X do Y or whatever, is that really considered a new mechanic? Or I don't think that they're gonna shake up the game that much. I think they'll want whatever they add. I think it will try and avoid a large scale rule change.
I agree that I don't think they're gonna shake up the game, but I don't see that any reason why they wouldn't add to the game.
Right.
I mean, also too, like the ability to make the game more competitive and more, entertaining going into these continentals with the best of the best players actually might be an incentive to, introduce a new level of play.
And I did say that
that'd be already like a kind of a stale meta, if you will, which we're going to talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, maybe I did say that. Maybe it's the flip side. Maybe they just want to go, full send and just like, like you said, these are the best players. Let's just continue the game along and see how they deal with it at this point in time. But it will be interesting to see.
All right.
What else we got, Brad?
The next one I wanted to bring up was a card from last week. It's a new 4-cost Uninkable Genie. He has evasive, and whenever you quest with, he's a 2/4 and 2 lore, and whenever you play him, you can draw a card. So I wanted to know. I asked this on Twitter, and I asked it in the local Discord as well. How do you slot this card in? Do you find it effective in any competitive decks? I know Rabbit holds that spot pretty firmly in an Amethyst deck. So in what instance would you use this card? Do you think it's good? I mean, obviously in Limited, he's fantastic. But aside from the fact that he's uninkable. But do you see him in scenario where you split that spot with Rabbit and use him for the extra lore, or what? Or just add him to it? No? Okay.
I think the 4-drop slot is not as contested as people think. Rabbit, you never replace the Rabbit, but I think there's plenty of room for a 4-drop on curve card in Ruby Amethyst.
That replaces itself, to be clear. So I actually think this card is really good. It replaces itself on entry, so it's great. It has evasive. I think this card's good. I don't know if it's a Rabbit automatic 4 of, but I definitely think it's one of those cards you could certainly add to your arsenal of cards to put into your deck.
But it draws 1 on play and it has ward?
No, evasive.
Evasive. Yeah. Maybe I said ward. I meant evasive.
I just it's in German.
Yeah.
Vendig.
It looks like ward, but everywhere I've read said that it's evasive. So
that's fine.
I thought it was an interesting card. I like Genie. He has some interesting cards. He has some not so interesting cards as well. But I wanted to at least ask you guys that, as people who are very familiar with the amethyst, ruby amethyst especially, if he has a place on there or what you would do with him. But I didn't expect a full discussion about the card. Just what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah, it's not a terrible card. It's hard not to compare it to the Maleficent Sorceress that has dropped out of a lot of Amethyst decks. They're just like, if I play this on 4, it's uninkable. I draw a card. It's great that it replaces itself. And if it survives, I get 2 lore out of it, right? But it's not going to trade back great. And it really only, from what we've seen currently, it's going to survive to steal against steel, but it's not going to survive against ruby. So
sure,
I feel like, maybe the Maleficent Sorceress is better. Obviously, Rabbit is the best, but
yeah, I think what I'd be interested about to see is if there's any shift target that makes this card even
you got the
better.
Emerald
Although at
shift.
4, it's kind of expensive. Yeah, but
I get it.
I don't know. I mean, I think if the question is do you take this or rabbit every single time?
Yeah.
Like I don't even think there's a debate there.
Right.
Is there a place to put this on the deck? I think the answer is maybe.
I think there's better
I'm not
cards
sure.
to be greedy with, honestly.
Yeah.
Like in Ruby Amethyst, Super Peepo is another greedy card that I think you're trying to get that free lore out of or whatever, and I think that's a better card. Even Knowledge and Wisdom is potentially, if you want the free lore. Yeah, the cantrip is nice, but I don't know.
Cool.
The next card we got here, I just wanted to add because I love saying it, which is
Sure.
Epilumps and Woozles. It's a emerald card, 2-cost inkable action song. Chosen opposing character can't quest during their next turn. Draw a card. I also actually think it's kind of good. Is it the best card in the game? No. But I think for a common card, this is absolutely one I think I would draft for sure in a limited format.
It'll be really, really good in limited.
And I think John brought it up on the Discord today too. Ursula, Deceiver of All, singing it, get you 2 cards and stop 2 people from questing. Pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, not too bad. But with that, we'll move into Constituents Corner. And I think, Mayor, the inbox is full today.
We got a couple loaded questions here for sure. This is from our team member, Jimmy. He goes, what is a card or a couple of cards that you think is or are really good, but either don't fit the current meta or don't have a critical mass of cards to support them? For example, imagine a world where Ariel's spectacular singer, but only like 2 good songs in the game. You might think it's a great card, but won't play it until a few more good songs are released to make her worth playing because you need roughly 20 songs to make her work. Or imagine Hiram in a world where all the items are terrible. What do you guys think? Do you have any cards in mind?
The card that most comes to mind to me is Alice, Growing Girl.
I wrote that down. The very top. That was going to be mine.
There are a lot of cards. What?
For the support one you're talking about, right?
Yeah, the support one. Yeah. There are a lot of cards that have support, but I think like the problem I have with a lot of these is like you need more enter the battle effects, more ETB effects to make them playable. And like this card gives you all other cards support as is. So I think like that's the struggle on playing this card the most is that's the lack of like on play effects to build a deck around Alice, which is really a shame because I really like that card. It's a beautiful card. The Enchanted is even prettier, to be honest with you. I know a lot of people have differing opinions on how they thought of Rise of the Floodborn Enchanteds, but I really loved Rise of the Bloodborne artwork for their Enchanteds.
Sure.
So, but yeah, that's the card that like instinctively comes to mind.
That's so funny that you say that. Another thing on the list of that we're the same person in a lot of ways. But yeah, Alice is number one on my list. I found a lot of success with her in between the Ursula set championships and the release of Shimmering Skies in a blue Fossa deck that was all decked out with support. It was blue yellow, and it had the Queen in there to give Alice the 8 just on questing, and then the actual support that she has just automatically makes Alice quest for 5 almost. But it only worked in that deck. Like, I don't think there's a single other deck that you throw Alice in and can find use without that pairing of those colors. And I think that there could be a lot more cards that actually could support her, for no pun intended, to make her better than she is now, and not that niche deck. Go ahead, Andy. I'll list a couple other ones after you go, if you have one.
No, I don't have one in particular. I was gonna say in general, I think a lot of just like stuff that exists in the game, support being one of the abilities, even evasive to some extent, a lot of these don't get a chance to shine really because they don't have these immediate effects, whether it be an enter the board effect or like a static effect. Like, I don't think Prince John's is necessarily an enter the board effect, but you can play Prince John and then immediately activate his ability. These sort of uninteractable, reward you can gain from a card. I think there's a lot of them out there that are currently just like, it's an added bonus. Oh, it has evasive. That's awesome. I'm really playing it for this other reason, kind of thing. I think a good example of them sort of trying to make these available is like cards that do something. What is the one whenever you play a hero? Phil. Whenever you play a hero, gain a lore, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sort of enables these lesser value attributes, if you will, to have a much bigger value. We saw an example of it. I'm sure we'll talk about it more with the Queen's Sensor Core. Having a princess or queen in play gets you that lore, and so queen or princess would never have been. It's hard to make that valuable for a card, but the more we see these other cards sort of come online, I think just anything can become. Vince talks about all the time. Alien's gonna become a thing.
Just about to say that with the classification. I was like, Gantu, come on,
yeah.
Buy me my summer home.
Yeah.
Yep. We're actually going to have Gantu on as a guest today, right? He's supposed to.
Yeah, if we have time, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
One other one I had on my list, I have a couple other on my list, was the Emerald Hades from was it Inklands or Ursula's Return?
I'm trying to make fetch happen, Brad.
Ursula's Return.
As more cards come out, I think there'll be more applicable targets to make him worth. I mean, like, he's only going to survive that turn. I know, like, you've never been a fan of it, and nobody runs it. But I think in time,
I just think it's funny that you keep trying to make it work.
I haven't tried. It's in my head. I've never actually tried to make it work in a deck. But
okay.
Yeah, for those not familiar with the card I'm talking about, basically it's a 3 or 4 cost legendary Hades from Ursula's Return, and when you exert him, you banish a card on your board for another card of that name in your deck. So if you had like a 3 cost Mickey, you could replace him with Brave Little Taylor if you're playing green red.
Any of them into like shift sort of.
It's like an automatic shift, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course it's drying, but you're getting it out like 3 or 4 turns early, and then assuming that Hades survive, he won't survive if there's something on board to take him out, because he only has like a 3 body. But in my mind, I'm like, well, as more cards come out, there's going to be more targets to make that combination actually, more fun. There were tries with green blue to make Tamatoa, drab little crab, turn into big Tamatoa. I wanted to do some kind of into big Goofy was the first thing I thought of. How do I get this big Goofy out there? But there's no other Goofy in green or steel to have on the board to make that work at this time, or at least not yet. I think they just announced a new Goofy this set that might work, but he's a 5 cost, so you'd still be only getting the big Goofy out 2 or 3 turns. Sorry, Peepo. It's Peepo on this podcast. So that was one of the other ones.
You need something like a baby Mufasa. Like
I do
1-drop Mufasa.
I do, yes.
And then that way you could use it and then cheat out the big Mufasa.
Yeah, I'm all for that.
Like I was gonna say
blast deck.
Even better is you put out the 5-drop Mufasa and then banish it
so you get 2
to
characters.
Play another Mufasa.
Love it.
And then you get a character off of it as well. But really backing up, what I was originally cooking here is has anyone considered the Baja Blast line of ramping on 2, playing Hades on 3, and then tapping Hades on 4 to Hades himself to then play the blue Hades to then remove an opponent's character and then continue the game with a 2 lore 3/6 character on board? Because he can Hades himself, right? And then bring out blue Hades.
That's a good question. I'm sure that you probably can. I don't know if the card says other.
It might.
I just set it up a second ago. I can look at because it's the card is Hades.
It says other
dealer.
It says other.
Yeah, it's other.
Yeah.
Choose another
one
character.
of your other characters.
Yeah.
Well,
that's a good idea though. I never thought of that.
Because I think honestly, if that were the idea that you had, I think if that were the way the card was written, we'd probably have seen it in play a little bit, or at least
it was probably not that good of a line.
I mean, it's a line, and I think we would have seen some testing in it.
Maybe.
What other?
All right. Anything else?
I was going to say Jim Hawkins as more locations come out, and then maybe even the Mirabelle, because she's very niche now. But maybe as we get a bunch of lower cost characters, you could flood the board and get some use out of that Mirabelle that Andy's currently holding up. But yeah, I just made a list of things that could potentially be better as cards come out. But I don't know. Jimmy did have one more thing. He goes, if you can make a strong enough case, maybe I'll do a buyout on TCG Player for that card. So I hope
Mirabelle.
Yeah, Mirabelle.
Mirabelle.
Specifically the enchanted one.
The
error print. The
Shimmering Skies.
We're not going to be able to see it on
you're not going to be able to see it, but I've got an error print. I call it Red Eyes Mirabelle Dragon. There's like red ink in all of the white text.
That's crazy that you got that.
5th place. Let's go.
All right. And our next question?
Yep, this is from John, also on our team. The first chapter contains some of the best staple cards in Lorcana. However, it remains the set with the lowest amount of supply. With these core cards continuing to rise in price as time goes on, do you think Ravensburger is going to price out new players that want to be competitive? Should RB start reprinting key cards in new sets? And should RB implement a rotation similar to Magic the Gathering to help combat this?
Next question.
So no implementation of a rotation. A rotation costs a lot of money. I'm all in favor of reprinting popular cards. That's perfectly fine. Especially it means we get new artists in there. And if those cards truly are staples that Ravensburger wants to keep in the game, meaning they don't want to ban them, they don't want to see them, errata or pushed out or something like that, then I definitely think it's healthy to continually reprint some of these cards. We see it in games like Magic the Gathering, where, I don't know that they did it as much when I used to play back in early, 2000s.
Does Magic not have a rotation? I thought they did a rotation.
They have a rotation, but they reprint cards as well, right? So even the larger formats where you can play, let's say any card except for the small ban list they have, you don't have to necessarily go pay, $5,000 for a play set of a particular card. You can just get the, reprinted version from 10 years later that is $1 a piece. We see that with Soul Ring a lot in Magic the Gathering.
But if you wanted to, you could play the
right. You can in those formats and stuff. So I think that'll be great. I do understand the collectors aspect of it and like the value of these old cards and stuff. So I think we should try and avoid some of the pitfalls that these other card games have done, like Pokemon and stuff, where, you know, those first edition, some of those cards are incredibly hard to tell the difference between, like, was this the first Charizard they printed or the second Charizard they printed, right? So I love the fact that, you know, Lorcana just has the same characters over and over and over again. And so I don't see any reason why we can't have another whole new world card with a different art from a different artist in a different set that just does the same thing, you know?
Well, actually, that was one of, I think, if I remember from when Lorcana was brand new, one of the pushbacks from collectors was that Lorcana did not do like the first edition, which Pokemon did. They did on the first printing. You could see that it was like a first edition.
Well, they had a stamp,
card.
yeah.
And so Lorcana didn't do that, which I'm glad they didn't, to be fair, about that. I mean, I know a lot of collectors wanted that. I mean, as a person who plays the game, I'm really glad they don't do that. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I was a little flippant with John here. I just because I know him and he's also giving me trouble in the Discord. So earlier today is that I just think Ravensburger should also probably reprint the first chapter again.
Yeah, just keep going. I mean, at this point, honestly, when do we stop?
Well, here's the thing. I'm not saying just keep going forever ad nauseum, but I don't think there's like. We've just now, as of like Shimmering Skies, really started to see, like, I see nonstop ads now for Lorcana. So you're getting new folks into the game. They're launching in a whole bunch of different languages. Like the Gateway product is now just being launched in Spanish as well. So I'm sure Spanish is coming soon. That puts us at 6 languages or so, and not all those languages were able to be printed in the first couple sets. I know they're going to I think they've announced that they are printing in Japan and in China the first sets.
Nice.
Oh, they were printing all the sets in all
exactly.
Languages.
Well,
like Australia's getting set 1 too, aren't they?
Right, but that's English, right? Like it's not like
I thought they were just going to start over again and rush out all the sets at once, but the biggest question for me is like, I'm cool with that. I like that idea, but at what point do we phase out because if it's about getting new players into the game, well then they need set 1, but they also want set 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and now 3 years from now we're getting more new players in. They want all of those still. And then when it comes to us, the current players, we're going to buy all the first chapter packs, and then the LGSs are going to be stuck with nothing but set 3 and 4 or whatever.
I mean, I'm kind of done buying first chapter sets of first.
I'll buy them all.
I don't know that I could stop. If I saw chapter 1, I would immediately buy it. I don't know how much, what quantity, but like if chapter 1, if I had the choice between chapter 1 and current print, I'm going to buy chapter 1. I don't know why. It's an addiction, but like there's still
the only reason I want to buy. I just want to buy a sealed box of chapter 1 so I can have it for my collection.
Yeah. They don't make them.
But
oh, that's also true. Yeah, they're not shrink wrapped. I mean, sealed, but yeah,
sealed as it gets. But yeah,
you're just gonna have to buy it from a reputable buyer. Which, by the way, Will Fortuna. I'm just kidding. You can like Mickey Mouse bleep that.
I'll sell you one, Vince. I know a guy. He lives under a bridge. He'll sell you one.
Lives under a bridge. But I mean, I do think there's a point at which Ravensburger needs to not print. I just don't know that we're right there yet in the game being so young. But I think like, a year on shelves is good, with the exception of the first chapter, probably because its availability wasn't so widespread. Probably deserves like another, 6 months on shelves, maybe even arguably Floodborne as well, although Floodborne's a little bit easier to get your hands on. But I think that the answer that you have is that they should just reprint core cards in the future, like any other game does.
In some capacity.
I don't think we're there yet, though.
Certainly.
it's like people might want to might balk at the price of some first chapter cards, but quite frankly, like nothing's that expensive in the first chapter, really. That's like super outlandish. Like I'm saying that in comparison to other TCGs. I'm not saying like I totally get it if you can't afford it, and I'm certainly fortunate to be able to afford it and buy the product that I do. Not everybody is. But what I will say is we're not at that point where like, like Be Prepared is like, $200 or something, right? Where it's a card critical to the game that you need potentially 4 of in a deck, and that's going to cost you $600. Yeah, that's a huge problem. Just have one card be uber expensive. That's kind of critical to the game. They need that would need a reprint, I think.
Yeah, I think also that like this can be said about like any of these sets, right? Like I don't know that the first chapter really has the most staple cards. I want to go and run the math and do the numbers on it and see, but like I know personally when I have my cards sorted by set, so that when I build a deck, I build it based on like color and number, cost and things like that. But then when I go to try and pull the cards from my pile, I sort it by chapter, to be able to get to them more easily. A lot of decks are concentrated in 1 or 2 chapters. A lot of them just skip a chapter card. I mean, the Emerald Steel deck plays 2 cards from the current set, just the Muses, the 2 copies of the Muses. And some cards
is because Bruno's and Ursula's return card, right?
I believe
so. So's Muses.
Is it? So none. It plays none from the new set. Is that what's going? Pete, I guess, is the only one.
It plays Pete, and I feel like there's one other card, right? But maybe I'm.
And I think,
anyway,
I think over time we'll see that there'll be more staples. I mean, and it also depends on the deck as well. There's probably listeners out there who don't play Ruby Amethyst and don't care about the bounce package cards or whatever. They're not staples to them or something like that. So I don't know that the first chapter specifically is the only one that has staples. I think in general, staple cards that continue to be in the meta, that Ravensburger is okay with allowing to remain in the meta, should be reprinted to some extent for the sake of like inclusion and price. We're not at that point yet. You're right. Like they don't cost too much. But if it gets to that point, I definitely think that's something they should do.
What would you say is your threshold, though? Like, when do you think? At what point should Ravensburger? Because like a lot of these TCG companies, and I don't imagine Ravensburger being any different, will say they don't pay attention to the secondary market. Right?
You're right.
Like they're not paying attention to the secondary market. But at what point, as you as a player who is paying attention to the secondary market, would be like, I want a reprint? Like at what point does A Whole New World or Tamatoa or Be Prepared or Big Tinkerbell, all cards, mind you, first chapter.
Right. I think when they become unavailable, I think there is the reason the price goes up on some of these cards is because of the value or the rarity of them, right? The longer a set has been out of print, the more the cards have been played, the more cards that have been dropped in their dog's water bowl by accident, the more cards that have been ruined in set championship play. It just, things happen to them. The supply of them dwindles, and that rises the pricing card. Personally, $50 for a card is a lot. I think that's kind of the limit where $50 is really like, sometimes Diablo was worth $55 or Sad Beast was $57 or whatever. But for the most part, I think most cards are under $50 now, and there's really only maybe 10 or 15 that are actually in that $20 to $50 range. And I think that's pretty decent. I imagine you're right, Vince, that Ravensburger will just kind of be like, secondary market, I don't know what you're talking about. Buy boosters at your local game store or Target. I think they'll only have to address it when it comes to a point where, like, when casters of DLCs are forced to comment on the fact that players literally don't have the cards available. Well, John, it looks like they've got this card in their deck because they can't afford the whole new world. Yeah, that's right, Steve. They're up to $1,400 a piece these days, and it's just when we get to
why
that
they're running
kind of
finders keepers,
right? Like when we get to that point, I think we're going to be, they're going to be forced to address something like this. I don't think they're going to be like hawking the secondary market to be like, okay, this one's too expensive. Print. Be nice, but yeah, I'd personally $50. I don't think any card should ever be more than $50. $200 for a playset of a card is absolutely insane. Especially when you have two people in your household that play the game and they both decide they want to play Emerald Steel, and then you have to go buy, a bunch of cards.
Yeah. So I was looking here. The on TCG Player, the most expensive cards that are non-promo, not enchanted, is Rapunzel, Gift It with Healing.
Yep.
$41. Beast Tragic Hero. And that was, I think, Inkland's card? No, it was a Floodborn card.
That was a Floodborn card. Yeah.
So, Chapter 2, also $41.
And then Robin Hood's probably right there behind it.
I can tell you it's $44 in the St. Louis area, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at I'm not looking at individual ones. So,
a little more expensive in store, unfortunately.
Robin Hood, there's always shipping, so it's probably, you support your local game stores, folks. Robin Hood Champion of Sherwood is like $36.
Which is wild. That card is not seeing a lot of play these days. It's a good card,
at least locally. Yeah, I still have it in my Steel Song that I'm trying to revisit. But
and then you have Diablo Devoted Herald coming in at $26.
Lower than I thought. Diablo.
Wrong Diablo.
For the audio listeners, Andy keeps holding up the baby Diablo.
Yeah, I am definitely in the camp that Ravensburger should not create a rotation at all.
Yeah, I want to give my quick thoughts too. I haven't said much about it. I'm very much in the camp that I think players should have cards. I remember when they were talking about reprinting Chapter 1, or at least re-releasing it right there before Floodborn dropped, was that all the collectors on the Facebook groups and everybody's like, oh, it's decreasing the value of my cards, and I'm like, too damn bad. This is a game meant to be played. It's a family game. It's a Disney game that a lot of people are going to want. Like, more cards in people's hands means more people in the community, which means more just the community's thriving, the game's thriving, and then we'll just get more stuff, more DLCs, more cool events and set championships. And I don't know much. Again, I'm probably most new to this in the comparison to us three, but as far as rotations and stuff, I don't fully understand or know how those work or any of that stuff. But so I can't fully comment on it. But ultimately, what I want to say is I think that more cards in people's hands, especially new players, like Andy said, 3 years from now, is a good thing. Like, if they want to have access to Chapter 1, I think they should have it, and not just off the prize wall at the DLC, right? So that's where I'm at.
Give me all your tickets for one pack.
You make a good point, Brad. I guess for the people who aren't aware of what a rotation essentially is basically, we're going into set 6 here, right? Let's say they do a 6-set rotation, right? That's 1 full year of Lorcana we've had now. Right, just about.
Crazy.
Well, we just had 1 year. We're now going into past a year.
So they do 5 sets in a calendar year.
5 sets in a calendar year, basically.
So let's say 5 sets 1 year. Let's say now that then set 6 will come out, and set 1 will no longer be allowed in DLC or competitive play, and then set 7 will come out, and set 2 would no longer be allowed in competitive play. And they sort of do this rotating this moving target where you know what set's about to leave, so you can prep your deck for it, and you know what set's about to come out, so you can prep, the cards to add to your deck. But what it does is, one, it's an opportunity for them to balance the game, right? Because they can control the cards. If a card gets too overpowered, well, it's going to be phased out in a year, and generally they do longer than a year. I'm giving this example. But
Pokemon does this. If you ever look at a card on a Pokemon card, it usually has like a letter associated with it, and that letter denotes when a card is legal. Now, I'm not 100% sure because I've never really played Pokemon competitively. Is that pretty sure if a card is legal in the set, you can use any variant of that card. So, basically, they'll reprint some of the staple cards. Like, there's always a Pikachu. So if that card exists from a previous set, that is the exact same card, but it's just like an alt art version of it. Basically, you can still legally play it as long as that card exists. Now, I'm not 100% sure that's true, but that's my understanding of it in the rotation. Kind of similar to what Andy was saying about like how they'll reprint a card, and like basically all those cards will be legal in the format, no matter when they were printed, as long as that card is currently legal in the format.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it is ultimately a good thing for balance for the Ravensburger or the team making the TCG, but it is a very expensive thing for you, the player, because you are constantly forced to continually buy new. You can't just buy the new singles as much anymore, and then a lot of your cards lose value. You can't play with them anymore. All this investment you put in there, especially think about it now, the people who try and buy a play set of every card from every set, all of a sudden this set is not valuable. You never played that play set of Candy Lady that, wasn't a good card or whatever, like, but you invested in getting one.
Von Schweetz. Thank you very much.
So is it effectively a ban? Like, what's the difference between rotation and ban, right? Ban is just like individual cards as opposed to an entire set.
Exactly. A ban list would be they ban individual cards on a list. Now, generally speaking, games do both. Like a game like Pokemon,
can do both,
they do both. But generally speaking, what ends up happening is a ban list isn't super long. So like a card game like I think Yu-Gi-Oh!, which I'm only tangentially familiar with, I think has like a notoriously long ban list because I don't think they do rotation.
Right.
So they just ban cards. Yeah. So you have to kind of know what is played, which I think, Andy, you said last week or maybe a week before when we were talking about this, that you're not a big fan of ban lists either.
No, I like the ban list. I don't like the erratas. I think the ban list is a better option than the erratas. I think we talked before. I hate the idea of showing up with a card and it like being allowed, but like it's different than what you thought. And granted, we have just Bucky for the erratas, but apparently in card games like Yu-Gi-Oh!, I'm told that there are cards that have been errated 2, 3, 4 times, and they've been like reprinted in between those. So like, they errated Bucky, they print the new one, but then like 2 years from now, they're like, you know what? We over errated Bucky. We're going to go ahead and errata him again and print a new one. Now, 10 years later, you're new to the TCG. You grab all your older brother's cards or your dad's cards and you start going through them and stuff. And you're like, I'm going to play with this Bucky, but like, which version is actually legal? And then, it gets really confusing. I'd rather you just, tell me to go out back and burn the card and send me a new one.
Yeah, so just outright ban it, then repeatedly errata a card. That makes sense to me. All right. Anything else we want to talk about with this question?
I think that's it. I'm going to thank everybody Jimmy and John for submitting questions.
Yeah. And do you want do you want to highlight potentially where people might be able to ask questions in a few by the time this episode comes
Probably,
out?
yeah. By the time that we air this episode this weekend, we should have the our Discord, Rules of Villainy Discord set up. I've been working on it, setting it up, trying to make it pretty, put some rules and roles and everything on there. We've been testing it out with some people joining off and on just to see if everything works correctly, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. So if you look in the description below, we should have a link to the Discord server. Feel free to join. There will be a rules prompt where you have to acknowledge the rules with Ruby the Amethyst Dragon emoji. It's a lot of words there. Once you do that, the server should open up all the channels that you can see, and hope that you partake in the discussions and have a good time while you're there.
Yeah. But if you have questions, if you have questions for the villains, please send us your questions by commenting on this video down below, or tagging us on Twitter at Rules of Villainy, or joining the discussion with us on our Discord, which will be in the show notes. And if it's not, Brad is to blame.
He'll be there. He'll be there.
It's already in the template.
I trust him. Let's move on to discussing overall set championships and our plans for the Disney Lorcana Challenge in Seattle. So we did set championships. You both participated in it. I ran it at game night. So we had some interesting decks here. We talked about it a lot, but I think, we're going to talk about it a little bit here before we dig into these other ones, is Green Steel. Zan's deck was, played in quite heavily in the set championship. You have built it. I have finally built it as of today. So what are your thoughts?
What's interesting about it was that I don't know the exact number of Emerald Steel that we had in there. It was definitely quite a few. I think we had 3 in the top cut, 3 or 4 in the top cut, but none of them made top 4. Andy can talk about his top 8 game, and it's just wild. I'll leave the details for that, but I don't know. It kind of gives me confidence, to that if I avoid those matchups. I ran into the same one I ran into at Grapes, and it got 0-2'd because I was just playing a fun Mufasa deck at game night. But going into Seattle, I really don't want to be just like I did with the last DLC that I went to, where I'm specifically playing Blue Steel, which I do enjoy playing, but I really only played it to, counter the Bucky, try to get as far as I can, ramped as far as I can to deal with Bucky. And now I feel like I need to do the same to deal with John and Diablo and all those things before my hand gets discarded down. So the point of telling that was that at game night, it didn't make the top 4, despite, having good pilots behind it. And I, am kind of seeing the light, but at the same time, I don't enjoy playing that deck, or playing it or playing against it, and kind of ranting here at the moment. So Andy, if you want to take over.
Well, I just want to say, so out of 31 people, we had 7 people. It was the most played deck.
Yes, for sure.
Night. It was 7 played Emerald Steel, and just behind that was 5 Ruby Sapphire decks, and then there were 4 Amethyst Sapphire, so the Blurple deck. So those are the top 3 decks, was Emerald Steel, Ruby Sapphire, and Blurple. And then Amethyst Emerald and Steel Sapphire came in behind it, tied with 3 decks. But conversion rate into top cut, it looks like 4 of the decks. So when you look at top 8, you do say that none of the Emerald Steel decks made it to top 4, but 4 of them made it to top 8.
How many of those? I know Andy wasn't on the play going into the top 8. I wonder if the other 4 weren't, or the other 3 were as well.
I don't think any of us were.
Interesting.
I don't think anybody.
My matchup didn't matter. Player draw. Green Steel is really good in both the play and the draw, so I wasn't worried too much about that. What I should have been worried about was Hunter. Everyone boo Hunter in the comments.
Love Hunter.
triple Boo Hunter now. He's played 3 insanely infuriating decks. This one a bit more creative than the last 2. I'll give him that. But he is the better lucky than good, mate. He is.
Don't take. Yeah, I mean,
it's a good deck. He's a great player, but
yeah,
man, there were some intense matches. He had a really wild deck we'll talk about here. The Queen Sensor Core Ketchup Mustard deck, and
we're not the only people talking about that deck today.
Yeah, it's been
kind of all over the internet.
Yeah, it's gone far and wide. This deck here, this Ruby Amber deck, which we'll link in the show notes. We'll link all these decks in the show notes. But is the card I think really surprising folks the most is Queen Sensor Core. I will say there's always, as a person who's judged a lot of these now and run them, it's never a good sign when I walk by a table and it was always with Hunter and like their opponent would be like, what's that card do again? Can I see that card? Because you just know that it's throwing them off their game plan on what they thought they were going to do. And so, they this 2-cost Shimmering Skies card, Queen Sensor Core. At the start of your turn, if you have a princess or queen character in play, gain 1 lore. Royal Search, exert, pay 2, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a princess or queen character card, you may put it in your hand. Otherwise, put it on top of your deck.
And it's a put. So even if you're up against Diablo, you don't get to draw from it.
Yeah.
Absolutely wild.
It's a really interesting list. It's an aggro deck at heart. It just tries to run you down, and it does it in a way that you're not really expecting. I most certainly should have played for something like the Double Sing Queen or the Muses. If I could get one or both of those down, it could have swung the game quite a bit. In fact, I did get the Muses down at one point, and it held him off for a little bit, but I just didn't have the songs really to back it up. But it is very well executed. I make fun of Hunter all the time, but he is a very good player and makes really, really good decisions when it comes to the altar and when to play certain cards and when to play around certain cards. And he seems to process the decision making very quickly too, which is very skillful.
Very fast player.
But it sort of boils down to, if you're not expecting to play against it. And as a result, like Vince said, whether it's reading the card and just not exactly sort of understanding how some of this stuff works, it's not a deck that you know how to play against. And if you can't very quickly understand their win condition, their outs, really, right? Play to your and your opponent's outs. If you don't know what your opponent's outs are, it can be very difficult to just sort of play to it. Do I think the Ketchup Mustard Queen deck is better than Emerald Steel or Red Blue or any of these other sort of proven meta decks?
Yes.
Not really. No. But do I think it's good enough to take enough wins to win a set championships or get darn near close? And absolutely. It is a very well put together deck, and I enjoyed playing against it. I went 1-2, so I lost the matchup, but did get a game off while on the play. But yeah, it's interesting.
I'm talking more about a little bit about the catching folks off guard. I want to talk a little bit about Jesus I'm Not Proud deck, as he also joined the Emerald Steel Club, but with a flair of his own, as always.
He told me I'm not allowed to call it a mirror match. I played him as well. He said it's not a mirror. You're not allowed to call it that.
What was the result of that match?
I won 2-0.
Yeah. I mean, he's a good player.
He's a great player.
player. Yeah,
I'm not blaming the player. I'm blaming the cards. Okay.
He beat me. He beat me 2-0 tonight. But I was playing with this deck. But I was playing my Ruby Sapphire, not my Greens Steel deck.
That's pretty nice that he got around the Ruby Sapphire.
Well, the first game I just didn't have a lot of card draw. Like I just did not get what that deck needed to do, and I still need to make some adjustments to that deck, which I want to talk about because I want to talk about Justin's deck. But one thing I wanted to point out as we were talking about the like catching people off surprise is he plays the Mickey Mouse Food Fight Defender, this 1-drop 1/2 resist 1. And what's kind of unique about this is that he plays this because he's got the playful sorcerer Mickey Mouse shift target on there, but also that 1-drop cannot be like you can't sing the Storm Rage on. No, on it because it's got
Storm
the
Rage
resist.
on, right?
So it'll survive. And so you might see, because you don't see that card, you're not used to it. You might think, 1/2, I can just easily clear that with a song, but actually you can't with that, on curve necessarily. You have to do other things to it. So, and then the other card, which I think is kind of spicy here, which we've seen try to be used a few times here and there, is the Prince John's Mirror.
You get that off of me. It just like, honestly, I don't know if it helped or hurt him. I think the game may have been sort of already over. We've heard other podcasters and stuff, and the casters of DLCs talk about how Emerald Steel just sort of puts this lock on the opponent and just keeps them out of playing the game. I think it was post lock being established in this game. But he played that against me, and I just played all of my cards down to 3 against him. So like, it sort of forced me to answer all of his stuff. I guess if there became a point where he didn't have stuff and I only had answers to his stuff, that I'd have to discard my answers. But like at that point, I think it's kind of over. So it was an interesting card. When it came down, it did make me like slow down and pause and consider my game plan going forward. But we'll have the link down to it. But essentially, it's green steel. It doesn't run the Diablo package. It runs the Prince John package with some of the discard. It looks like it uses a whole new world, Sudden Chill and Bruno. But it runs that Mickey package like he talks about. And what I think is honestly the best addition to this deck, the one card or combo that I was kind of actually like,
what you're gonna say here,
is the Megara.
Megara Hercules.
Yeah, Megara liberated one ward, and whenever you play a character named Hercules, you may ready this character. So it's a 4/4 with ward for 5. Again, he played this against me, and it was the one card that I was like, okay. And then I read it twice, and I was like, that's not a bad card. And I'd already seen him ink several different Hercules. He runs the 2-drop Hercules in training, the 2/3 vanilla card, as well as the 3-drop 3/3 bodyguard Hercules. So 8 different Hercules cards that can ready up this Meg. And at 4/4, it is formidable to challenge, ready, challenge again. But it's also one of those true ready ups. So it's not ready and can't quest again. You can quest and quest and quest. I think he told me one of the games he got like 13.
13. I watched it happen. He was sitting right next to me. It was his round 4.
He got a lot of lore out of the Megara by playing these Hercules down. It costs a lot of cards in your deck list. That's one of my biggest concerns. Because you have to play all these Hercules. But they're not terrible cards. So it was an interesting deck to play against. And I'm not surprised that Jesus got a card. He's a very skilled player. I think this is 3 different decks now he's played in 3 different set champions and gotten a card in each of them. I know he's gotten quite a few cards and a couple playmats actually, but
so I think he's gotten 3 cards, 2 playmats.
I think he's played different lists, like different decks in each of these, though.
He has, yeah.
So, very very skilled player. One of our teammates.
Well, actually, no. Now that I think about it, I think he played the same list in 2 of them and played something different for game night.
Fair enough, but yeah,
it's still. I mean, he legit built this deck the night before.
Right. I think when I sat down to play him, I said, "Oh, you're playing Emerald Steel, but with jank cards in it." Apparently, so
But I mean, it got him to a top 8 finish. I think he placed
for sure
eighth out of the whole tournament.
Yeah, he was really happy about it. I was excited for him as well. The list is not bad. Emerald Steel already has such a great list. Why change it?
Because interesting is more exciting than just. That's a whole nother conversation. But I applaud Hunter and Jesus and everybody who
for sure
has the courage is the best word I can use there to think of these ideas and go out and do it in a meta right now where you're going to run into Emerald Steel and Red Blue, and that's just going to take you down,
agree.
Right? Yeah,
I felt very courageous knowing that I was taking the deck that I did into this set championship, knowing that there'd be people like Brad and Vince who would throw shade and hate on me just for coming up with this very unique list of cards that 100% was original to myself and not at all stolen from Zan card for card.
As your deck name stole from Zan. So do want to talk a little bit about Red Blue. So the Ruby Sapphire deck piloted to the championship here by Justin Ward, who we had on the podcast. He's also a top 16 qualifier at the Las Vegas DLC. Definitely we're seeing some different card choices here than what was brought to Vegas a little bit. So we see the inclusion of the Sisu Daring Visitor in this deck.
Oh, he brought that back. Wow.
I'd like to think that was because of the so Grapes released their data. I don't know if we'll have the link, but grapesgames.com I think is their website. They released a blog post today actually. It'll be a couple days old by the time you guys hear this, where they talked about the meta breakdown of their set championship, and there was actually, I want to say Amber Amethyst was one of the top represented decks there, and we actually saw on stream Hunter, remember Double Boo Hunter, playing the most degenerate, insanely fast, hyper aggro deck there was, and I felt through the camera that Justin wished he had human Sisus to deal with this. So it looks like maybe he was experimenting with trying that route for Ruby Sapphire. I believe he did say when we had him on he will be playing in Seattle. So I know it's a little more relaxed for him, having already got his invite, but it seems like he is sort of changing around a couple of these cards in his Ruby Sapphire deck to try and get a feel for what's gonna work out best in Seattle.
You know what card isn't in here though? King Candy.
Yeah, King Candy's gone.
I think it's a good addition.
Candy Lady isn't in here.
Yeah, he was talking about that one for a while. I think the Sisu's a good addition too, for even if you're up against Ruby or Emerald Steel. If you get that ice block out instead of Popsicle, which I know you want the Popsicle, 10 times out of 10 on the because you want those cards in your hand for the discard, but being able to get rid of that I almost said Sisu again. Diablo shift right away with this Sisu would be, I think, a pretty good move, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. So next week we'll dig in more about Seattle, but just wanted to get your initial kind of thoughts on do you guys have you committed to what you think you're going to play in Seattle? Or are you still thinking about it?
I'm not committed yet. I'm still toying around with Blurple. I feel like that should be the one since that's what I've been playing the most and I'm comfortable with it. But at my back of my mind's telling me that Steel Song or Blue Steel is probably Blue Steel more so than Steel Song is the route to go if I'm expecting to run an Emerald Steel all day.
When it comes to Blurple, are you saying that your mind is telling you no, but your body is telling you yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to be clear on that.
What about you, Andy? You committed now to Emerald Steel in Seattle? Yeah.
I mean, short of like Zan showing up at my house and like explaining to me this new magical sauce that beats Emerald Steel, I'm having trouble finding another deck to play. I do really want to test this against Blue Steel a good bit more and test it against Ruby Sapphire a good bit more.
I'll build it.
But I really think that it is an incredibly strong deck. I've said this before on the podcast. I'm a big fan of a deck that sort of has agency. And while this one doesn't really like quest its way to 20 while you're trying to do your thing, I enjoy being sort of the one that is making the moves and saying that, look, if you don't stop what I'm going to do here, granted I'm not going to get to 20 right away, but I am going to lock you out of playing this game, and then I'm going to get to 20 and you won't have fun doing it.
Yeah. I am unsure what I'm going to play. I have built Emerald Steel. I've started playing it now.
I think you know.
No, I don't. I really don't.
Really?
I really don't.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I have 3 decks currently built. I have Ruby Sapphire, which I'm finally starting, which, listeners of this podcast will know how much I've hated playing that deck. And I'm now starting to get good at piloting the deck. I'm not great. I'm not like where I think I'd be excited to take it to the DLC and rock with it. But I feel like I'm much more confident in decision making, still making plenty of like mistakes a little bit on like what I should ink and maybe
Saw you beat Green Steel today.
Alter, but yeah, but you criticized me how I beat that. You said I was too slow.
That I couldn't play fast like Hunter.
Seven
Yeah, no, I specifically meant like you were torturing our friend by playing a game that was long over multiple turns ago.
That's fair.
He's like literally he can quest to 19 and his opponent had 0 cards in hand, 0 cards on the board, and he goes, I'm gonna play a Visions of the Future, and like looks at the top 5 cards of his deck and he's like, which one should go in my hand? Just quest and pass, mate.
Listen,
your opponent was a very, very good sport about it, Hannah.
Villain Vince.
She was a great sport about it. But yeah, so I feel like I'm getting more confident in it. I think I would want more time if I was taking that to the DLC. I still obviously have my Ruby Amethyst deck built, but I'm not been feeling great about that deck. Although I played a match today when I was playing Green Steel against Ruby Amethyst, and I got wrecked because they just managed to like whittle with Brawl and had like characters down and using they had Queen's Castle to get additional draw, and then they had which I personally don't think is a great tech card, but is the Be King Undisputed in there. And so because they were able to like kind of brawl and take out other things, they were able to Be King Undisputed my 1 Prince John on the board, even though I had other things on the board, which is just kind of feels bad. So,
So
there's always thoughts to go back to that and play what you know, because that's what we say on this podcast is play what you know, play what you're comfortable with. So who knows? We'll see. I hope to have a better answer next week.
Definitely. We'll get into more Seattle talk next week.
Yeah,
for sure. Can I give one shout out before we move on?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, regarding Craig. He used to play at Fortuna a lot. He doesn't have a lot of time in the weeknights anymore to play, but he made it out to game night, and he made it he made it clear to me at the beginning. He's like, I'm really here because of you guys, me and you, Vince, and I think he might try to be there for Fortuna. It felt really good. And I end up getting paired with him first match, and he tells me at the head of the match, he goes, "You're really going to like this deck." He had a really humble steel amethyst deck, and I'm like, okay, he's running Doc, so when he's down to nothing, he draws 2 cards and has a great time with it. So in the 2 games that we played, I got hit 5 times in my red faucet deck, which everything's already damaged and everything, by Triton's Decree. At first I thought he was going to have a scar or something in there. I go, "Craig, what are you doing to me?" And then he goes, and he did it every time he prefaced this. And it got to me like the 3rd time you did it. He goes, "I'm going to exert 1 ink, and I'm going to make you choose where you put your damage." And it was always somebody who was going to be banished. And I'm like, that's why Triton's Decree is a good card, you guys. And I purposely didn't tell you then because I wanted to tell you tonight on the podcast, and I think that he would appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming, Craig, playing that card for the meme, or maybe just because it's a decent card and you did really well with it. So thank you for coming.
Yeah,
that's all.
No,
yeah,
I love Craig. I miss him at game night, but I understand why he doesn't come. Yep. I'm in Fortuna, but you know what I mean. But sure. We're going to move on to our villain of the week. Apologies to Gantu.
Are you serious?
Our card this week is Diablo, Devoted Herald. Set 4 card from Ursula's Return, a Floodborn ally in Emerald, legendary, 3 cost uninkable, 2 strength, 2 willpower, quest for 1 lore, and its shift, discard an action card, evasive, and its ability. Circle far and wide. During each opponent's turn, whenever they draw a card while this character is exerted, you may draw a card. The art on the legendary card is by Alice Pisoni, and the enchanted is by Christian Romero. So, gentlemen, Illumineers, friends, why is this card our villain of the week?
Take it away, Andy.
Because it is broken. The fact that you can shift it for just discarding an action card, or which all songs are actions, means that it can come out for free. Essentially, I know personally, I was a little worried that the fact that you were giving up a card from your hand might be of too much of value to make something like discarding. There's a couple of these Floodborns that discard something to get it, but the fact that you draw when they draw means that if this survives 1 turn, which it's guaranteed to do, you play it, you shift it, you exert it, gets to your opponent's turn, you're drawing 1 of those cards back. So now you're only net -1. Next turn you neutral out, and if it's not answered, then you are just drawing forever. And as we know, every deck loves to draw cards. Whether it's through Rabbit, through Friends on the Other Side, through Hiram, if you can't draw the cards and you can't find the cards that you need to answer it. And so it's just such a must answer card.
Yep.
Brad?
Yeah, I second everything Andy said. He's such a nuisance. You get him out there for free. He's evasive. So when I'm playing Blurple, the only real answer I have to him is ramping the Elsa really fast, the 5-drop rush evasive one. I think there's one more that I'm not thinking off of the top of my head, but yeah, he's just a pain. And then he's given its player cards while they're discarding us, and suddenly you're looking at your opponent holding, a full hand while you're holding 1 or top decking. And if you don't have the answer for them, then you're just going to have a bad time because they're just going to keep ramping up their characters, flooding their board, and hopefully you find a ramp, get to the answers you need, or you're dead in the water by turn 3, turn 4.
There's a lot of answers actually, Brad, in Blurple. I played against one of our teammate Mark's Blurple deck at game night, and his deck was chocked full of Diablo answers. There's the Peter Pan Shadow Finder.
Yep.
I think there's Peter Pan Shadow. I don't know if he played that one, but there's the Cruella. That's, I believe, a 3/2 or 2/3, 3/2 evasive on your turn.
Evasive on your turn.
2 cost. Yep.
And you can pair that, I believe, with the Cogsworth as well, which gives rush to a character for 1 cost. And so there was a lot of answers for this Diablo. And I mean, I was better lucky than good in a couple of those games. I had, I think, 3 Diablos on the board at one point. Kind of hard to beat that, but I can say that there are a lot of answers and none of them are ideal, and they often pull you away from other stuff. And the 1-drop Diablo, possibly our real villain of the week, enables this bigger Diablo so well. The fact that you can just see their hand. I wonder if you have an answer to my big Diablo.
Nope.
No, you don't.
I'm just going to see your first fight, your entire play line. It's so invasive. I hate it so much because the only way to see people's hands that I can name off the top of my head are that Diablo, that Ursula that you're also playing in that deck that's going to snipe a song, and then a Sapphire if they wanted to run Nothing to Hide from set 2. Which
Fair
had its time.
necessities.
Fair necessities.
I guess fair necessities.
Turn 1.
Sure.
But yeah, it's on turn 2.
That's the turn 2 play or song. But it's just so... The fact that you have such an oppressive deck and then you can just at any time see what I'm holding and just play around it is absolutely wild, and why I just feel attacked.
I will say I would love to be the Emerald player, though, that has the luck, the Emerald Steel player that has the luck of getting the turn 1 Diablo consistently, because I almost never see it, and I try to.
When are you mulliganing?
It's just like Bucky. You just mulligan the full 7. Yeah, all 7. That's what Hunter does.
7. And you know what? You don't actually need the Diablo on turn 1. You do if they hit the nuts combo, but you don't actually need the Diablo on turn 1. The Ursula on turn 2 is just fine, and the Morph on turn 2 and the potential Diablo shift after that. Zan, the creator of the deck, if you will, had a great video on how to play it, and it's accompanied by a spreadsheet where he talks about the importance of certain cards in your hand. I personally hard mulligan for the Diablo, the 1-drop Diablo. I really do like that play line as a primary play line, but Diablo, Little Diablo, Big Diablo, Morph, and Sad Beast are all sort of must-keep cards, according to Zan, for that line.
Interesting. The other thing we're not talking about here too is the Cove.
Hidden Cove is so
allowing
insane.
You to put, because you can on 2 shift Diablo, play Cove, move Diablo to Cove, and now you've put it out of brawl range.
And strength of a raging storm. Let the storm rage on. Sorry, not strength. But yeah, I will say one thing you definitely need to do is make sure that when you're playing this deck, that if you have the 1-drop Diablo in your hand, make sure it's actually a 1-drop Diablo. I've definitely played a game where I had the Cove in my hand, and I was like, "Oh yeah, 1-drop, got my Diablo."
Oh,
good.
I was like, "How did you confuse the 2?" It was the cost.
We'll mulligan, we're good, yeah. And then I'm like, "All right, turn 1, I'm gonna ink and play Diablo." Oh wait, the Cove. I guess I'm playing the Cove. That's our plan now. But yeah, it's really the only 1-drop because you don't really play Cove on 1.
Right.
it's a turn 2 or later play. But yeah, that's how Hunter got me when I was playing Ruby Amethyst in the first set of set championships. Was both times on his play, he had the Cove, and it rendered my Brawl useless, and I didn't really have a good backup plan for it. So the Cove can be really, really nice.
Right, because I mean, in Ruby Amethyst, there's no other evasive character you're running.
Elsa,
Like,
maybe, but turn 5 is too late.
Right? But
Yeah,
I mean, at that point, I wasn't running. Or did you run Elsa in your deck at that time? Because I didn't.
I mean, I might have had a 1 or 2 of. I wasn't as high on Elsa as some other people potentially were.
Yeah.
You know, they thought, and it is a really, really great card. I didn't like the level of power that she had on turn 5 compared to something like Maui, or even just a turn 4 play on 5, like another rabbit or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think through. Do you ever think about, I mean, I think this is an unoptimal play line, is adding Maui's fishhook back to your Ruby Amethyst
I
deck?
almost said that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't get you to the answer quicker, right? I think part of the problem is that basically you need to answer Diablo immediately. And
Right.
then you also need to answer like the follow-ups to Diablo immediately. And I just feel like Maui's fishhook might be a little too slow, just like some of these other answers. The Candy Lady, Vanilla Bee, random roster racer or whatever it is. I call her Rooster Racer because I thought it said rooster instead of roster. But that's not a terrible card, especially in red blue because you're ramping to play on 4.
Does she have rush?
Yeah,
Does.
rush.
Yeah, okay.
The 4-cost uninkable rush 3/3 that gains evasive until the start of your next turn.
Right.
So it's actually not a bad card at all, even outside the matchup against Diablo. But it is an uninkable card. It is at the 4-drop, and it is also slow in Ruby Amethyst, right? Diablo comes down on 2. If you're on the draw, you're giving up 3 cards before you really get to a chance to answer it.
Yeah. I mean, I just think like the problem with a deck like Emerald Steel, which I think in its current, Zan built deck, is that it isn't just that it has one good card, it has several really great cards. That have been
60 good cards.
That have been, I mean, I'm just looking. So, last week we did the entire deck Emerald Steel. The sub 5 deck. The week before that, we did Prince John, Greediest of All, which is a staple card in that deck. The week previous to that, we did Pete, Games Referee, which is also in that deck. And then we also did Ursula Deceiver. So,
join us next week. Ursula Deceiver of All, Villain of the Week.
And one of us, when we were trying to decide on Villain of the Week, I suggested Muses just because of the bounce that they provide on all of the songs in Emerald decks like this. It was more so, I think, because of a lemon lime deck, but they're very prominent in the when you get them out there with the ward, and just it's so sick that anything that's 2 cost, they can just bounce back at any song, and it
works great.
You can't do anything about it. Yeah.
But I mean,
well in mirror match.
This card though is why I typically tend to say that this version, the Diablo, is better than the previous Bucky iteration of Emerald Steel, because not only do they have effective ways to discard you, although maybe not as strong as the Bucky line. What makes this stronger is not only are they, maybe they have a slightly weaker ability to discard your cards, but they have a much stronger ability to draw cards.
Yeah.
And like the ability, when you get this going, it's like, oh, I'm gonna draw the Diablo trigger. Oh, you're playing Hiram. I'm gonna draw off that trigger, Diablo trigger. Oh, I'm gonna discard. I'm gonna draw off of Prince John. And so you kind of like stack these triggers, and you're just drawing a boatload of cards, which was the problem the previous iteration of this deck had, which is, you might be able to discard your opponent's hand much more efficiently with all the Floodborn characters, but you're going to run out of a hand.
Nothing to show for it.
Yeah. And so like your hope is then you can outrace your opponent, which was pretty effective. But the strategy there was, I think, like you would say a lot, Andy, is like ink and pass, get to that high level, clear the board to reestablish, because your cards your top decks are going to be a lot more efficient. I don't think that strategy of inking and passing works with this iteration of green steel, because they've got a boatload of cards to answer everything else that you're going to come back down in. So it just that strategy isn't effective.
That's what me and Mark have been talking about too, or at least Mark suggested, and I haven't really followed up a whole lot because I just haven't been deck building, is that he thinks, and I agree with him, the idea that if we're going to continue to play Blurple is just focus on the ramp, because our top game is a lot stronger, but we have to get the right cards to do it. And, so maybe we're not playing cards at the beginning. It's going to feel a lot like blue-red at the beginning, but if we can get the T-Pos and the Mickeys and whatever else, one jumps even to get the ink off the top of the deck and not from our hand, then if we can draw into the bigger players like Tink, or not Tink, I'm thinking of a different deck, Blue Steel, but the Elsa, get her out a lot quicker, and then Shift even, which I guess she loses the evasive, but the point is our top game is a lot better and might be able to squeak out the win if we can do it effectively. But again, it's just like any other deck. If if it works the way that it should, then then it feels great. But most of the time, like you guys, well, Andy especially, since he's been playing it a lot, will attest to that. Emerald Seal just rips you apart really quickly, and it seems to be very, very consistent, and it never feels good, at least from my side.
So
for sure.
We had kind of stopped doing this, but I'll put it to you guys.
No.
Errata, ban.
No.
What are your
thoughts?
Thoughts?
Maybe a ban on Prince John. Chance commented on our video last week when we talked about Prince John, and I followed up with him just today, actually. I want to approach erratas very cautiously. I think Bucky was a little bit overkill, but necessary. I don't think Prince John needs an errata. I think there need to be more answers for Ward. We've talked about this week after week now. If it had to be something, I think a ban would make the most sense, a rotation or however card games do it. But I kind of want to stay away from the errata field where, they just change a card because somebody complained too much, or I don't know. I don't feel good about the erratas.
So Diablo, ban, errata, no?
I think
no errata.
I think maybe the question is more not necessarily like what would we do with it now, but like if we could go back in time and worked for Ravensburger, like how would we balance this card, right? Like assuming this was a digital TCG or something like that, how could we balance this card? And so while I agree, I'm not all for erratas. I don't think this card should be banned. I don't, think any of that. I do think potentially this card could have been more balanced if it said something along the lines of once per turn. When your opponent draws a card, you draw a card, right?
That's fair.
That might nerf it too much. You could have added on other things like, not removing its evasive or, just making it cost more in general. I think there's one of the Floodborn ones that says like discard 2 cards,
maybe
any 2 cards to shift it or something like
I
that.
think I feel like that's something.
Yeah, there's
I
like discard a song, discard an action, discard a location, discard a character, and then there's one that's like just discard 2 cards, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So, maybe that would be a way to make it a little more balanced. But ultimately, I think the best thing Ravensburger can do, short of a time machine, just print some better answers to it, some more effective, more cost-effective removal.
I think that's the answer here, right? Is that we just have a limited card pool, and there are smarter people out there that I think will know the answers to maybe how to counter this in that deck. That isn't me right now. I cannot figure out the answer here. Maybe. I mean, I would think we may know the counter if we if it would be found, but we
knew it. We would tell you guys for sure.
Yeah,
our viewers just know
absolutely. I think that, but doing what you said, Andy, I agree. I think what I would probably change here is I would make this a more expensive card to begin with, and make it not have this discard an action card shift mechanic. I think this is a card that probably should have just had a shift X cost,
or even not shift.
Part of the exactly. Maybe not a shift. Although this would be, I think make it the first Floodborn that doesn't have a shift.
You would make it not a Floodborn then.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that I think that Diablo is considerably worse when you just have to play him outright. Being able to shift him and immediately turn him sideways in some fashion is what is one of the main reasons why, it's a big reason why he's really, really good. And he definitely loses some value when you play him regular.
I think the pairing in the deck is what makes him the strongest. I don't think he's that bad. I never did think he was that bad. There are answers, your cannons, your baboon. You got to be playing steel or whatever else to deal with it. But it was when he was paired with Bucky, and when now he's paired with Prince John, and just every other thing in Emerald Steel that just makes it harder and harder to deal with, because they're taking the answers away from the limited answers that you do have. Other cards are taking away from you. So he is a must answer card because you don't want to give your opponent draw, but at the same time, he's even more powerful because of the team that he has around him, the team of cards, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. I think the card that makes this significantly more difficult to deal with is that Hidden Cove, right?
Yeah.
The ability to take it out of certain ranges makes it significantly, the limited tools that did exist to remove it efficiently, and have made it significantly hard. The reason why we talk about these things like Elsa or the Peter Pan or the Vanellope von Schweetz Candy Lady is we're trying to find a answer about how do you deal with Diablo in Cove, right? Because that's the line. This card tends to be a lot easier. When your Emerald Steel player doesn't get this in Cove and you have an answer to remove it much more efficiently, it's less bad. But then you think, this is why we made Emerald Steel the villain of the week last week, though, as you talk about the whole kind of package of the deck. But when we're focusing on this particular card, which is hard to do in isolation, right? Because of how good that deck is and how synergistic it works. But when I think about it, it's this card wasn't, in my opinion, it's always been a must answer, but it's worse now because of how effectively people have been able to pair it with things like Cove. Because Diablo Brawl was in my deck for this card primarily, and I didn't have to worry about answers to things like Prince John, because people didn't play Prince John because he wasn't a Floodborn. He didn't advance the condition of discard in that deck, so it fell out of the meta. But now that Prince John's back, we got to figure out okay, how do we answer this warded character? And there aren't a lot of cards, like we talked about last week, that handle that efficiently at the same kind of like cost parity and stuff. It's like Andy's been talking about this, I think, since basically episode 1, which is that the removal in Lorcana is more expensive than playing characters to board. And like that makes sense. You don't want to have an like then you'd have this kind of boring dynamic where games are answered. But the fact that it's like so expensive, right? Like, if you're a Ruby Amethyst player or Ruby Sapphire, right? Like you're thinking about, okay, how do I remove Diablo and Prince John and stuff? It's like, well, I got Be Prepared. I can shift, to Big Sisu to remove. It's like, maybe if you're a Steel Amber player, you've got things like, Grab Your Swords. It's like these are like mass removal that don't target one character and stuff. There just really isn't a lot of that. There are like a handful of cards at best that do that. And it's part of it's just a limited card pool. But I will say it's like, I do hope more that an answer is in Azurite C.
Yeah. I think better answers would be nice, but I also think like the idea of everything you said, I think you can replace the word the Cove and change it to a lot of other cards in that deck, because if you think about it, just the same way the Cove shuts down Brawl, and it also shuts down some of the others like Storm and things like that. You could also on turn 2 just play Ursula. So you have to back up. Turn 1, you've played Diablo. You know the answer they potentially have to you in their hand. So right. Now you have Zan, when building this deck, thought to himself, okay, I can see my opponent's hand turn 1. Now what? Okay, how can I stop any song-based removal? Gone. Ursula. Easy. Okay, so how do I deal with character-based removal? Easy. I use one of my songs, Storm or Strength of the Raging Fire, to take out their character-based removal. They play the Sir Hiss, the 3/1 evasive Pegasus, the 3/2 evasive on your turn Cruella. I just take them out with one of my song spells for free. Again, I discard one, shift the Diablo, that costs nothing. I can play another character like a Morph to set up for my Sad Beast, and then I can sing with Diablo I just shifted a 3-cost song. So on turn 2, I've played 3 for the Diablo, 3 for the song that he sang, and 2 for the character that I played that turn. I've gotten 8 inks worth of value on turn 2, and that's so it just as much as the Cove shuts down Brawl, Ursula shuts down any song-based, a Strength of a Raging Fire or a Storm shuts down any character-based removal. They're, short of a location that banishes evasive birds, there's really no, there's no answer to the Diablo
That's right.
Emerald Steel can't answer. Granted, they have to have the cards, right? There's only 2 Coves in that deck. But, that's where the very forgiving altar system comes into play. In Lorcana, you get 14 cards maximum that you can look through. Obviously not just like look through them, but there is a well thought out answer to essentially every answer to your threat. There's a well thought out counter, answer to it. And it is not fun to play against, but I will say it's a heck of a lot of fun to play. I do definitely enjoy all the different lines that you get to play, and I think I came 1 card away from Zan's record. I had 21 cards in my hand at the end of one of the games. My opponent had a Amethyst Chromacon, And I remember they inked the Amethyst Chromacon, and I went, oh, that's probably a good idea, in case I have the big Diablo. And then they played the another Amethyst Chromacon. And I went,
let's go.
All right. And then they proceed to use it every single turn because they needed to find something. And I had 20 cards left in deck, and I had 21 cards in my hand at the end of that game. So, it's a very, very strong deck.
For sure. Well, any other last thoughts on our villain of the week here?
I just want to go play Duck Hunt.
Well, let us know your opinion of Diablo Devoted Herald in the comments below and tell us who you think should be the next villain of the week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We do track on those metrics. So, maybe one day we'll come at you and make sure that if you're a listener, you're liking and subscribing. But we're also on YouTube, so please be sure to like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon to be notified of our next episode. Until next week, stay safe, fellow villains. Be wary of wannabe heroes who want to disrupt your villainous plans. And as always, remember the rules of villainy.